I came home early expecting to surprise my wife and daughter. Instead, I found an empty house, forged papers, and a terrifying truth. My wife had sold our home, disappeared with my daughter, and ran away with another man. But what I discovered next was even worse. My name is Daniel Carter. I am 38 years old, and until a few months ago, I believed I had the perfect family. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in New York with my wife, Emily, and our 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. I worked as an electrician and often stayed late to earn extra money. Emily stayed home most days and sometimes helped at a small flower shop. Everyone who knew her called her kind and loyal. And honestly, I thought so too. Every morning she packed my lunch. Every night she waited for me with dinner. She smiled softly, kissed my forehead, and always said, "Drive safely." I never imagined that behind those gentle eyes, she was hiding secrets big enough to destroy our lives. That Tuesday started like every other day. The sky was gray, and rain tapped softly against my truck windows as I drove to work. But after only an hour, my boss called everyone together. "Power outage at the site," he said. "No work today. Go home and enjoy the surprise." The other guys cheered. I smiled too. A free afternoon meant I could surprise Emily and Sophie. Maybe we'd watch a movie or order pizza. I even stopped by Sophie's favorite bakery and bought chocolate cupcakes with pink frosting. I remember feeling happy. I'm really happy. I wish I could go back and warn that man driving home. I pulled into the driveway around noon. Something felt strange immediately. Emily's car was gone. That wasn't unusual by itself, but the front door wasn't locked. Emily always locked the door. Always. I stepped inside. "Emily?" I called. No answer. "Sophie?" Only silence. The house felt cold. The television was off. The kitchen sink was empty. A coffee mug sat on the counter, half full and already cold. I frowned. Maybe they had gone shopping. I walked upstairs. The bedroom door was open. And that's when I noticed it. The closet. Half empty. Emily's dresses were gone. Her favorite red suitcase was missing. The jewelry box I bought her on our 10th anniversary was gone too. I laughed nervously. "No, no," I whispered. Maybe she was organizing. Maybe she took things to donate. I pulled out my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I texted. "Hey babe. I'm home. Where are you?" No reply. My chest tightened. I walked downstairs again and noticed papers scattered on the dining table. Bank statements. Property documents. Some folders were open. I picked them up. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. Then my eyes stopped on one sentence. Transfer of property ownership. My name. My house. Sold. I blinked several times. There had to be a mistake. I looked again. The signatures. My signature. Except. It wasn't mine. Someone had copied it. My hands began shaking. I dropped the papers. No. I rushed to my office drawer where I kept important files. The drawer was open. Empty. The original property papers were gone. A strange buzzing filled my ears. I couldn't breathe properly. Who would do this? Then another terrifying thought hit me. Where was Sophie? I grabbed my phone and called her school. The receptionist answered cheerfully. "Hello, Maple Elementary. This is Daniel Carter. Is Sophie still there?" A pause. "No, sir." "What do you mean no?" "Mrs. Carter picked her up early today." My legs almost gave out. At what time? Around 10:30. I gripped the desk. Are you sure it was Emily? Of course. She signed her out. The room spun around me. Emily took Sophie. Emily sold the house. Emily disappeared. None of it made sense. I called Emily again. And again. And again. Nothing. I called her parents. They hadn't heard from her. I called her best friend, Sarah. No idea, Sarah said nervously. She hasn't spoken to me in days. Days? Emily talked to Sarah almost every evening. Why would she suddenly stop? I rushed to the police station. The officer behind the desk listened carefully. Your wife is missing with your daughter, he asked. Yes. And you believe she forged documents? Yes. I slammed the papers onto the desk. He looked serious now. We'll file an immediate report. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because deep inside me, something terrible was growing. Fear. Not the kind that disappears after a good night's sleep. The kind that sits in your chest and whispers horrible possibilities. I barely slept that night. I sat alone in Sophie's room. Her stuffed rabbit rested beside her pillow. Her crayons were scattered across the desk. A drawing hung on the wall. It showed me, Emily, and Sophie holding hands under a bright yellow sun. At the top, she had written, "My family forever." I stared at those words until my eyes burned. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. My heart jumped. I answered immediately. Hello. A man's voice spoke calmly. Mr. Carter. Yes. I'm standing outside your house. I rushed to the window. A black car sat in the driveway. A man in a gray suit stepped out holding a folder. I think, he said slowly, we need to talk about the property I legally purchased from your wife. My blood turned cold. Because at that moment, I realized this nightmare was much bigger than I had imagined. And I had absolutely no idea where my daughter was. The man in the gray suit stood calmly beside his black car while I stared at him through the window. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I kept hoping this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe Emily had made a mistake. Maybe she had been tricked. Maybe Sophie was safe somewhere waiting for me. But when I opened the front door, the man's serious face crushed those hopes a little more. Mr. Carter, he asked politely. I nodded. My name is Michael Reed. I purchased this property 3 weeks ago. I almost laughed. Purchased? I said. From who? Your wife. The words hit me harder than a punch. No, I said immediately. That's impossible. Michael slowly opened his folder. I thought something seemed strange, he admitted. Your wife said you were working out of state and couldn't attend the closing. He handed me copies of documents. There it was again. My forged signature. My house. Sold for less than half its value. I stared at the papers until the letters blurred. She told me she needed quick money, Michael said carefully. I didn't know any of this. I looked up. When did you last see her? Yesterday morning. My heart jumped. Where? She met me at a coffee shop downtown. Was Sophie with her? Michael hesitated. Then he nodded. Yes. My knees weakened. Was she okay? I think so. What do you mean you think so? He frowned. She looked scared. Those 4 words pierced my chest. What happened? I asked. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Your daughter was very quiet. She kept holding your wife's arm and asking. He stopped. Asking what? Michael looked away. She kept saying, "Mom, when are we going home?" I closed my eyes. For a moment I could hear Sophie's tiny voice. The way she stretched the word home when she was sleepy. The way she hugged me every night. I turned away from Michael because tears were already filling my eyes. "I have to find her," I whispered. "You will," he said gently. I wasn't so sure. The police searched Emily's bank records the next day. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Officer Karen Brooks. She spread papers across her desk. "Your wife emptied 3 bank accounts." I stared at the numbers. Savings. College fund. Emergency fund. Gone. My stomach twisted. "How much?" Karen sighed. "Almost $300,000. I leaned back in shock. That money represented 15 years of hard work. Countless overtime shifts. Missed birthdays. Weekend jobs. I remembered climbing electrical poles in freezing winters while Emily sent me warm messages. "I'm proud of you. You're the best husband. We're lucky to have you." Were those lies too? Karen slid another paper toward me. "We found something else." I looked down. A list of phone calls. One number appeared again and again. Hundreds of times. Whoever owned it had spoken with Emily for months. Mostly late at night. I frowned. "Who is this?" Karen folded her arms. "We think his name is Ryan Mitchell." The name meant nothing to me. "Boyfriend?" I asked. Karen nodded slowly. "We believe so." I stared at the page. Ryan. While I was working late. While I was buying flowers for anniversaries. While I was teaching Sophie how to ride a bike. There had been another man. I suddenly remembered small things. Emily smiling at her phone. Taking calls outside. Locking her screen when I entered. I had noticed. But I trusted her. I trusted her completely. And now I hate myself for it. 3 days passed. No calls. No sightings. No Sophie. I barely ate. The house felt haunted. Sophie's shoes still waited near the door. Her cereal bowl sat in the cupboard. At night I would hear creaking sounds upstairs and for one foolish second believe she had come home. Then silence would remind me she was gone. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went into Sophie's room. The moonlight spilled through her curtains. Everything looked exactly the same. Except. Her pink backpack was missing. I frowned. Sophie never went anywhere without it. Inside that backpack she kept her favorite things. Crayons. Tiny toys. And a little stuffed fox I had won for her at the county fair. I sat on her bed and buried my face in my hands. "Where are you, sweetheart?" I whispered. The silence answered me. Then suddenly, my phone rang. I jumped. An unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello." Heavy breathing. Then, "Daddy?" Sophie's tiny voice. I nearly collapsed. "Sophie." She was crying. "Daddy, please come get me." Tears rushed down my face. "Baby, where are you?" "I don't know." "Look around. Tell me anything." I heard a door slam. Then a man's angry voice in the background. "Who are you talking to?" Sophie's breathing became frantic. "Daddy, Mommy says we can't go home anymore." My heart stopped. "What?" "She says we belong to someone else now." For a second, I couldn't understand those words. Belong? What did that mean? "Sophie, listen to me carefully. Are you safe? She started crying harder. I want you. I'm coming, sweetheart. I miss you. I miss you too. Then another voice shouted. Louder this time. Give me that phone. Sophie's scream pierced through the speaker. Daddy. The call ended. I froze. Every muscle in my body turned cold. Officer Karen traced the number immediately. Her expression changed as she looked at her computer. What is it? I asked. She looked up slowly. Daniel. I could tell she didn't want to say it. My chest tightened. What? Karen swallowed. The phone signal came from a city 200 miles away. I stared at her. But that wasn't the part that terrified me. It was the next sentence. And the address. She said quietly. It's connected to an organized child trafficking investigation. The room suddenly felt too small. I couldn't breathe. Because for the first time, I realized my daughter might be in far more danger than I had ever imagined. The words kept echoing inside my head. Child trafficking investigation. I stared at Officer Karen as if I had heard her wrong. No, I said quickly. No, that's impossible. Karen didn't argue. She simply pushed a glass of water toward me. We don't know exactly what's happening yet. But Sophie called me. I know. She sounded scared. Karen nodded. I know. I slammed my fist onto the desk. Then why are we sitting here? Several officers looked up. Karen stayed calm. Because if we rush in without evidence, they could move your daughter somewhere else. That sentence frightened me even more. Move her. Somewhere else. The thought made me sick. I stood up and started pacing. I should have seen it. Karen watched quietly. There were signs. What signs? I rubbed my forehead. Emily changed. I remembered nights when she stayed awake long after I slept. Times when she hit her phone. The way she became annoyed whenever I asked simple questions. I blamed stress. I had blamed myself. Because that's what people do when they love someone. They make excuses. Karen opened a notebook. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about Emily becoming secretive. About strange shopping trips. About expensive clothes appearing without explanation. Then suddenly, I stopped. A memory flashed in my mind. My eyes widened. Karen noticed. What is it? 3 months ago. What happened? I swallowed hard. Emily asked me something strange. Karen leaned forward. What? She asked how much money Sophie would inherit if something happened to me. Karen's face changed. And what did you say? I laughed. The memory feels painful now. I remembered Emily standing in the kitchen. The smell of coffee. Sophie's laughter in the backyard. I smiled and said, everything I own belongs to my girls. Emily smiled back. But now, that smile looked different in my memory. Not loving. Calculating. I sat down heavily. Oh God. Karen quickly wrote something down. Did Emily know all your financial information? Everything. Passwords? Yes. Investments? Yes. Karen sighed. Daniel, this wasn't sudden. I looked at her. You think she planned this for a long time? I do. Those words hurt more than I expected. Because if Karen was right, then every kiss, every anniversary, every I love you, might have been part of a lie. The next morning, Karen called me early. We found Ryan. I jumped out of bed. Where? He rented an apartment in Cleveland 6 months ago. Let's go. Karen hesitated. Daniel. I'm coming. She studied my face. I hadn't shaved in days. My eyes were swollen. I looked exhausted. But I wasn't leaving this to anyone else. Karen finally nodded. Stay behind me. 3 hours later, we stood outside a worn apartment building. Rain dripped from broken gutters. The parking lot was almost empty. Karen signaled the officers. Everyone moved quietly. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Apartment 207. Karen knocked. No answer. Again. Still nothing. Then an officer forced the door open. We rushed inside. The apartment was empty. My heart dropped. No Emily. No Sophie. Just trash. Empty pizza boxes. Beer cans. Old newspapers. I looked around desperately. Please. Karen searched the bedroom. An officer checked the bathroom. Then suddenly. Officer. Everyone turned. A young policeman held up a small pink backpack. I froze. I knew that backpack. I would recognize it anywhere. Sophie's. I snatched it from his hands. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was her stuffed fox. Her crayons. A coloring book. And a folded piece of paper. Karen carefully opened it. It was a drawing. A little girl holding hands with her father. Above them, Sophie had written. Daddy, please find me. I couldn't stop the tears. I covered my mouth. Karen looked away to give me privacy. But then she noticed something. At the bottom corner of the page. Tiny letters. Almost hidden. What does this say? She asked. I wiped my eyes. There was an address. And beside it. 3 words. Blue House. River. Karen's eyes widened. This might be where she is. Hope exploded inside me. You know it? Karen nodded slowly. There is an old house near the river outside Columbus. Then let's go. Karen didn't move. Her face had become serious again. What? She took a deep breath. We found fingerprints in this apartment. Ryan's? Yes. I waited. And Karen hesitated. I felt cold again. And she looked directly into my eyes. There are fingerprints from 3 other men. My stomach twisted. What men? We don't know yet. I stared at her. Suddenly the apartment felt darker. More dangerous. Karen gently took the drawing from my hands. Daniel, listen carefully. I shook my head. No. These people may be dangerous. I don't care. You have to. I don't. My voice echoed across the room. Everyone became quiet. I pointed at the drawing. That's my daughter. My voice cracked. She's waiting for me. Karen looked down. For the first time since meeting her. I saw sadness in her eyes. Because she knew something I didn't. Something terrible. She finally spoke softly. The house near the river. I nodded impatiently. What about it? Karen swallowed. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. We raided that house 2 years ago. I stared at her. What did you find? Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. Missing children. And suddenly. I was terrified that I might already be too late. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Sophie alone in a dark room, hugging her little stuffed fox and waiting for me. The clock beside my bed showed 2:17 a.m. Then 3:04. Then 4:11. I gave up trying to sleep. I sat in the kitchen staring at Sophie's drawing. "Daddy, please find me." I traced the words with my finger. "I will," I whispered. Even if I had to search every house in America. At sunrise, Officer Karen arrived at my house. She looked tired too. "The team is ready," she said. I grabbed my jacket. The drive to Columbus felt endless. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. No one talked much. Karen kept studying maps. Police radios crackled with quiet voices. And I stared out the window. I remembered Sophie learning to ride her bike. She had fallen 5 times. On the 6th try, she stood up, wiped her tears, and said proudly, "I'm brave." I smiled at the memory. Then my smile disappeared. "Please stay brave, sweetheart. Please." The blue house stood at the end of a dirt road beside a narrow river. It looked abandoned. Broken windows. Peeling paint. Tall weeds covered the yard. A rusty swing moved slowly in the wind. The sight sent chills through me. Karen held up her hand. "Stay behind us." Police officers spread out. The whole place was silent. Too silent. Karen nodded. An officer kicked the front door open. "Police." We rushed inside. Dust filled the air. The living room was empty except for an old sofa and scattered bottles. Another officer searched upstairs. Karen checked the kitchen. I looked everywhere. "Sophie!" I shouted. No answer. My heart sank. Maybe we were too late. Then. "Dad?" A tiny voice. I froze. My entire body shook. "Dad!" "Sophie!" The voice came from downstairs. Karen pulled open a hidden basement door. Darkness. A narrow staircase. I didn't wait. I ran. "Daniel!" Karen shouted. But I was already halfway down. The basement smelled damp. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling. And there, in the corner, curled beneath an old blanket. It was Sophie. My Sophie. Her hair was messy. Her cheeks were pale. But she was alive. "Daddy!" She ran toward me. I dropped to my knees and held her so tightly I thought my heart would burst. She cried. I cried. I didn't care who saw. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." She buried her face in my chest. "I knew you'd come." Those words shattered me. Because she never stopped believing in me. Even when I almost lost hope myself. Karen knelt beside us. "Sophie, sweetheart, are you hurt?" Sophie shook her head. But she wouldn't let go of me. Karen spoke gently. "Where is your mom?" Sophie became quiet. Her fingers tightened around my shirt. "It's okay," I said softly. She looked up at me. "Mom left." "When?" "Yesterday." Karen and I exchanged looks. "Who was with her?" Karen asked. "A man named Ryan." I clenched my jaw. "And?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "They argued." "What about?" She hesitated. Then whispered, "Me." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Sophie wiped her nose. "Ryan wanted money." Karen stayed calm. "And your mom?" "Mom said she already sold the house." My stomach twisted. But Ryan wanted more. The room became silent. Sophie looked at me nervously. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart, She lowered her voice. I heard Mom say. She swallowed hard. I heard her say she could sell me too. The world stopped. I stared at her. No. No mother would say that. Not Emily. Not the woman I loved. Not the woman Sophie called Mom. But Sophie's frightened eyes told me she wasn't lying. I pulled her closer. Karen slowly stood. Her face had changed. Anger. Real anger. When Ryan heard police were investigating, Sophie continued softly, they fought. What happened then? Karen asked. Mom cried. I almost laughed at the unfairness. Emily cried. After everything? Sophie continued. Ryan took all the money and left. And your mom? She ran away too. Did she say where? Sophie nodded. I held my breath. Chicago. Karen immediately grabbed her radio. We have a location. Officers rushed upstairs. Everyone suddenly moved faster. Hope returned. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. Then Sophie tugged my sleeve. Daddy? Yes. She looked ashamed. Is this my fault? The question hurt more than anything. I held her little face in my hands. Listen to me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You did nothing wrong. But Mom left because of me. No. She didn't want me. I shook my head firmly. Your mother made terrible choices. Sophie's lips trembled. But you? I kissed her forehead. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. She wrapped her arms around me and cried quietly. And at that moment, I made myself a promise. I would protect my daughter. No matter what. No matter how long it took. No matter who stood in my way. Because Emily Carter had stolen my money. She had stolen my home. She had almost stolen my child. But she was about to learn something she had forgotten. A father's love is not easy to destroy. And soon. I was going to look her in the eyes and ask the question that had haunted me every day. Why? The ride back home should have been happy. I had Sophie beside me again. That was all I had prayed for. But the little girl sitting in the back seat wasn't the same cheerful child I remembered. She stared quietly out the window. Every few minutes she looked over her shoulder, as if afraid someone was following us. I kept looking at her through the rearview mirror. Every time our eyes met, I smiled. And every time, she tried to smile back. But it never quite reached her eyes. That broke my heart. That night, Sophie refused to sleep alone. Daddy, she whispered, holding her stuffed fox tightly, can I stay in your room? I knelt beside her. Of course. She climbed into my bed and curled up next to me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The house was strangely quiet. No Emily. No arguments. No lies. Just me and my daughter. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. Did Mom ever love me? The question hit me like ice water. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to protect her from the truth. But I also didn't want to lie. I chose my words carefully. I think your mom loved us in her own way. Sophie frowned. Then why did she leave me? I pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. Sometimes adults make selfish choices. She looked confused. More selfish than loving? I couldn't answer immediately. Because I was asking myself the same question. Finally, I kissed her forehead. Yes. Sophie nodded slowly. Then she whispered something so softly I almost didn't hear it. I don't want to become like her. Tears filled my eyes. You never will. And I prayed that was true. The next morning, Officer Karen called. We found Emily. I stood up so fast my chair fell over. Where? Chicago. My heart pounded. And Ryan? With her. I clenched my fists. After everything. They were together. Living their lives. Eating dinner. Sleeping peacefully. While Sophie cried herself to sleep. Karen continued. They rented a small apartment under fake names. When do we leave? Karen hesitated. Daniel, this is police business. I don't care. You shouldn't see this. I have to. Karen sighed. Be ready in an hour. Chicago was cold and windy. The apartment building stood between a grocery store and a laundromat. Nothing special. Nothing that looked like the hiding place of people who had destroyed a family. Karen stopped me outside. You stay here. I shook my head. No. Daniel. No. Karen looked like she wanted to argue. But then she saw my face. And she stopped. Police officers quietly surrounded the building. Everyone waited. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From anger. I thought about Sophie crying. About my empty house. About the forged papers. About every lie Emily had told. I wanted answers. Finally, Karen raised her hand. The officers moved. 3 loud knocks. Police. Open the door. Silence. Then crashing sounds inside. They're running, someone shouted. Everything exploded into motion. Officers rushed upstairs. I followed. Karen yelled at me to stay back. I didn't listen. When I reached the hallway, the apartment door was open. And there she was. Emily. My wife. She stood frozen in the middle of the living room. For a second, we simply stared at each other. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter. Her face looked thinner. But her eyes. I knew those eyes. The same eyes I trusted for 15 years. Now they looked terrified. Daniel. She whispered. I waited. Maybe for an apology. Maybe for an explanation. Maybe for some sign that the woman I loved had existed at all. But she only said. You weren't supposed to find me. I stared at her. Then I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because I couldn't believe those were the first words she chose. You sold our house. She looked down. You took my money. Silence. You left Sophie. Emily began crying. I didn't mean for things to happen like this. I took a step forward. Then how did you mean for them to happen? She couldn't answer. My voice rose. Did you love him? Emily closed her eyes. Yes. The word hurt. Even though I expected it. More than us. She cried harder. I don't know. I shook my head. No. I pointed toward the police officers. You knew. Emily covered her face. I was unhappy. I stared at her in disbelief. Unhappy? You worked all the time. I laughed bitterly. I worked for you. I was lonely. So you sold our life. I made mistakes. Mistakes? My voice echoed across the room. Mistakes are forgetting birthdays. Tears ran down my face. You sold your own daughter. Emily looked horrified. No. Sophie heard you. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She couldn't answer. Because there wasn't a good answer. There never would be. At that moment, another officer emerged from the bedroom. We got Ryan. Two officers dragged him into the living room. The moment I saw him, every ounce of anger inside me exploded. He looked ordinary. Jeans. Leather jacket. Messy hair. This man destroyed my family. Ryan smirked at me and quietly said, "She chose me." I lunged at him. Officers grabbed me instantly. I struggled, shouting, crying. Years of love and pain crashing out all at once. And while I fought to reach him, I noticed something. Emily wasn't looking at Ryan. She wasn't defending him. She was staring at me. And for the first time since all of this began, I saw regret in her eyes. Real regret. But by then, it was far too late. I didn't say another word to Emily. I couldn't. There are moments in life when you realize the person standing in front of you is not the person you loved. Maybe they never were. Or maybe they changed slowly while you kept believing in an older version of them. As the officers handcuffed Emily, she kept looking at me. "Daniel, please," she cried. I looked away. That hurt her more than anger ever could. Ryan wasn't crying. He rolled his eyes and complained. "This is ridiculous." An officer pushed him toward the door. "Save it for the judge." Ryan smirked at me again. "She wasn't happy with you." I felt my fists tighten. But this time, I didn't move. I just stared at him. Because suddenly, he looked small. Not powerful. Not special. Just a selfish man who destroyed lives for money. And Emily had thrown everything away for him. Back in Ohio, the news spread quickly. Neighbors whispered. People stared when I walked into stores. Some offered sympathy. Others were simply curious. One afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins from across the street brought me a casserole. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything." She looked embarrassed. We all thought Emily was perfect. I almost laughed. So did I. The words tasted bitter. Sophie started seeing a child counselor. At first, she barely spoke. She sat quietly drawing pictures. Most of them showed houses. Some were broken. Some were empty. But in every picture, there was always a father holding a little girl's hand. One evening she sat beside me on the porch. The sunset painted the sky orange. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "Will Mom go to jail?" I took a deep breath. "Probably." She looked down at her shoes. "Is she scared?" I didn't know. And strangely, I didn't care anymore. Maybe that sounds cruel. But there is only so much pain a heart can carry. Finally I answered. "I think she is." Sophie nodded slowly. Then she surprised me. "I don't hate her." I looked at her. "You don't?" She shrugged. "I'm sad." That simple answer made my eyes sting. Because children often understand feelings better than adults. 2 months later, the trial began. The courthouse was packed. Reporters waited outside. Emily entered wearing a gray sweater. No makeup. No smile. The confident woman I married was gone. She looked tired. Small. Ryan sat beside his lawyer looking annoyed. As if all of this was someone else's fault. The prosecutor stood. He presented everything. The fake signatures. The stolen money. The secret accounts. The abandoned child. Every lie. Every betrayal. I watched the jury carefully. Their faces became colder with each piece of evidence. Then it was Emily's turn. She slowly walked to the witness stand. For a moment, she couldn't even look at me. The courtroom became silent. "Why did you do it?" the prosecutor asked. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I thought money would make me happy." The answer shocked everyone. The prosecutor frowned. "That's it?" Emily wiped her face. I grew tired of struggling. I stared at her. Struggling? I worked 12-hour shifts. I missed vacations. I fixed my own truck because we couldn't afford a mechanic. And yet, we had a home. A family. Love. Wasn't that enough? Emily continued. Ryan promised excitement. The courtroom stayed quiet. But excitement fades. Her voice cracked. And when it did, she finally looked at me. I saw shame in her eyes. Deep shame. I realized too late what I lost. I felt nothing. That surprised me. No anger. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. The woman I loved was gone long before this courtroom. I was grieving someone who no longer existed. Then came the hardest moment. Sophie testified. I didn't want her to. But she insisted. I'm brave, she told me. The same words she said when learning to ride her bike. She walked into the courtroom holding her stuffed fox. Emily started crying immediately. Sophie. My daughter stopped. For a second, I worried she would run to her mother. Instead, she stood beside me. Emily covered her mouth. Sophie, sweetheart. Sophie looked at her quietly. Then asked. Why didn't you want me anymore? The courtroom froze. Emily burst into tears. I did want you. You left me. Emily couldn't answer. You sold our house. Silence. You scared Daddy. The judge lowered his eyes. Several jurors wiped away tears. And I could barely breathe. Because hearing your child say those words is a pain no parent should ever know. Emily cried uncontrollably. I'm sorry. Sophie looked confused. Children believe apologies fix things. But she was old enough now to know they don't always. She asked one last question. If you could go back. Emily nodded quickly. I would change everything. Sophie stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly said. But you can't. And somehow. Those 4 words became the saddest moment of the entire trial. Because everyone in that courtroom knew she was right. Some mistakes cannot be undone. And Emily Carter was about to lose everything she once took for granted. The verdict came 3 days later. I held Sophie's hand as we sat quietly in the courtroom. She squeezed my fingers so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I squeezed back. Neither of us spoke. Across the room, Emily sat beside her lawyer. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her shoulders were bent. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Ryan looked completely different. He wasn't smiling anymore. He kept tapping his foot nervously and whispering to his lawyer. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The room became silent. I could hear Sophie breathing beside me. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading. For Ryan, the charges included fraud, kidnapping conspiracy, and child endangerment. For Emily, fraud, forgery, the illegal sale of property, child abandonment, and several other crimes connected to the case. Emily closed her eyes. I watched her hands tremble. The judge looked directly at them. This court has considered not only the crimes committed, he said, but also the pain caused to innocent people. He paused. Especially to one little girl. Everyone looked at Sophie. She lowered her eyes. My heart hurt for her. She was only 9 years old. She should have been worrying about homework. Not courtrooms. Not betrayal. Not losing her mother. The judge continued. Ryan Mitchell is sentenced to 12 years in prison. Ryan stood up. This is insane. The guards immediately held him back. You can't do this. The judge ignored him. Ryan kept shouting as officers dragged him away. Emily didn't even look at him. Not once. She just sat there crying silently. The judge turned toward her. Emily Carter. She slowly raised her head. You are sentenced to 8 years in prison. A soft gasp spread through the courtroom. Emily began shaking. No. Her lawyer whispered something. But Emily wasn't listening. She looked at Sophie. Only Sophie. My baby. Sophie's fingers tightened around mine. Emily stood suddenly. Please. The guards moved toward her. Please let me talk to her. The judge hesitated. Then nodded. Just once. Emily slowly walked toward us. I remained seated. My body is tense. Ready to protect Sophie if needed. Emily knelt in front of her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Emily whispered. I'm sorry. Sophie looked at her quietly. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. I know saying sorry isn't enough. Sophie nodded. Emily cried harder. I was selfish. More silence. I thought money would fix everything. Her voice cracked. But all it did was destroy everything. Sophie listened. Not angry. Not smiling. Just listening. Emily wiped her tears. You were the best thing in my life. Sophie lowered her eyes. Then why wasn't I enough? Emily froze. No answer came. Because there wasn't one. She cried silently. And for the first time, I felt sorry for her. Not because she deserved forgiveness. But because she finally understood the cost of her choices. Too late. Far too late. Finally Sophie spoke. I don't hate you. Emily looked up in surprise. But I don't trust you anymore. Those words hit harder than any prison sentence. Emily covered her face and sobbed. Because trust, once broken, it is almost impossible to rebuild. The guards gently helped her stand. As they led her away, she looked back one final time. At me. At Sophie. At the family she destroyed. Then she disappeared through the courtroom doors. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, that's what I thought. But healing isn't quick. It's not like movies. There were still nightmares. Some nights Sophie woke up crying. Sometimes she asked difficult questions. Daddy? Yes. Was Mom pretending all those years? I stared into the darkness. I don't know. Did she love us? I thought carefully. I think she did. Then why did she hurt us? I sighed. Because people can love someone and still make terrible choices. Sophie was quiet. Then she moved closer. I'm glad I still have you. I wrapped my arm around her. And I'll never leave. This time, I meant it with every piece of my heart. A few months later, the court officially returned my house to me. The bank restored part of my savings. Michael, the man who unknowingly bought the house, even came by to apologize. You were a victim too, I told him. He smiled sadly. You know something? What? You look different. I laughed. Worse? No. He looked at Sophie playing in the yard. Stronger. I followed his gaze. Sophie was riding her bike. Laughing. Really laughing. For the first time in months. The sound filled the whole yard. And suddenly I realized something. Emily stole many things from us. Money. Security. Trust. But she didn't take everything. She didn't take our future. That evening, Sophie and I planted a small apple tree in the backyard. The same backyard where she once played with her mother. The same backyard where I thought my life had been perfect. Sophie patted the dirt around the tree. Do you think it'll grow big? I smiled. It will. What if storms come? I looked at her. Then at the tiny tree. Storms always come. She frowned. Then how does it survive? I brushed dirt from my hands. Because its roots grow stronger. Sophie thought about that. Then smiled. And standing there beside my daughter, watching the sunset paint the sky gold. I realized something important. The lesson wasn't to never trust anyone. The lesson was this: trust slowly. Love wisely. And when life breaks your heart, never stop protecting the people who truly love you. Because sometimes, after losing almost everything, you discover what matters most was beside you all along. A year passed. Sometimes I still woke up before sunrise and sat quietly in the kitchen. Old habits are hard to break. For years, I used to wait for Emily to come downstairs and make coffee while Sophie got ready for school. Now the house was different. Smaller somehow. Quieter. But it was honest. And after everything we had been through, honesty felt like a blessing. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daddy? I smiled. Sophie walked into the kitchen wearing her soccer uniform. She was 10 now. A little taller. A little stronger. And every day, she looked a little less afraid. You promised pancakes, she reminded me. I laughed. I did. She sat on the counter while I cooked. Just like old times. Except now, she talked more. About school. About her friends. About books she wanted to read. The darkness inside her was slowly fading. That was all I ever wanted. Our backyard looked different too. The apple tree we planted after the trial was growing. Not huge. Not yet. But its branches stretched a little farther every season. One Saturday afternoon, Sophie stood beside it. Daddy. Yeah. Remember when I asked if storms would kill it? I smiled. I remember. She touched one of the leaves gently. It survived. I nodded. So did we. She smiled proudly. That smile healed parts of me I thought were broken forever. People still asked questions. At the grocery store. At soccer games. At church. Some whispered. Some stared. Others wanted details. What happened? How could your wife do that? Do you hate her? At first, those questions made me angry. Later. They just made me tired. Because the truth was simple. Hating Emily wouldn't bring back the years we lost. It wouldn't erase Sophie's nightmares. It wouldn't change the past. One evening, Sophie asked me the hardest question of all. Daddy? Yes. If Mom comes back one day. I looked at her carefully. Would you forgive her? I didn't answer right away. The sun was setting. Golden light filled the backyard. I thought about betrayal. About lies. About crying alone at night. About searching for my daughter. And strangely, I didn't feel anger anymore. Just sadness. I don't know, I admitted. Sophie nodded. That's okay. Then she said something wise beyond her years. Forgiving someone doesn't mean trusting them again. I stared at her. Who taught you that? She grinned. My counselor. I laughed. That's pretty smart. Sophie shrugged. I think so too. A few months later, I received a letter. I knew who sent it before I opened it. Emily. My hands trembled slightly. I hadn't heard from her in almost a year. I sat alone at the kitchen table and slowly unfolded the paper. The handwriting was familiar. Every word hurts. Daniel. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. Prison gives you a lot of time to think. Every day I remember Sophie's face in the courtroom. Every day I remember what I destroyed. I used to blame everyone else. You. Money. Life. Now I know the truth. I ruined my own happiness. If Sophie is smiling again, tell her that's all I ever wanted. And if she never wants to see me again, I understand. Emily. I folded the letter carefully. Then I placed it inside a drawer. Not because I hated her. Not because I loved her. But because some chapters of life are meant to stay closed. That night, Sophie and I sat on the porch eating ice cream. The stars shone brightly overhead. Daddy? Yeah. Are we going to be okay? I looked at her. Really looked at her. The little girl who survived fear. The little girl who never stopped believing I would find her. The little girl who taught me how strong love can be. I smiled. We already are. She leaned against my shoulder. And for a while, we sat in silence. Peaceful silence. The kind I once thought I'd never feel again. I used to believe the lesson of my story was never trust anyone quickly. But now I know it's more than that. Trust should be earned. Love should be protected. And when someone breaks your heart, don't let them destroy your ability to love the people who stay. Because money can disappear. Homes can be lost. Even families can fall apart. But if you keep kindness in your heart, if you protect the people who truly love you, you can rebuild. Stronger. Wiser. And maybe, happier than before. That is my story. And if you're listening to it right now, I hope you remember one thing. The people who love you don't make your life perfect. They make it worth fighting for.